is recording. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to pull up some slides really quick and just make sure we're all set to go. Okay, can someone give me a thumbs up if you can see the slides okay? Great, yay. All right, let me click through to make sure. Looks like we've got people here. Awesome. All right, well, I say we get started. So welcome everyone, thanks for joining this breakout room. This one is gonna be focused on maintaining a team and some tips on how to do that and a little bit of shared experience from my perspective. And there's also a couple other people on here that I'll be asking to share some of their perspective as well. We have Elise McQueen from Ball State University, Sterling from Stanford, and Kenzie, I believe you're also on. So if you have any advice to share as well, we would love that. And like Noah said, we have about over 20 minutes for this session, so we have plenty of time. And we're going to share some stuff from our perspective and offer some tips, but we would also love any discussion points or input or questions from the rest of you throughout. So I'll make sure I pause it here or every now and then so that y'all can ask questions, but just keep that in mind. All right, so let's do it. So this housekeeping slide is coming back a lot, but just make sure your Zoom display name is with your name and your school. Keep yourself muted unless you're talking. Feel free to put stuff in the chat as well if you don't want to unmute. This is being recorded, and you can either message us or send us an email if you have some difficulties. So in this breakout session, we've got three main topics we're going to cover. The first one being administrative upkeep of your team, the second one being funding, and the last being team culture. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on each one. Team culture, we may spend some more time on because that one is a little bit nebulous and sometimes one of the hardest things to do when maintaining a team. All right, so to kick it off, talking about administrative upkeep, the first thing is leadership. And of course, we have our fearless leader of the Department of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, over here to watch over us. So to give a couple points, I'll start off by going through some from both my experience and just general advice. So in terms of establishing a leadership team, I would strongly recommend to anyone who has a team going at your university, have a small group of team members that are willing to put in some time to help lead the team with you. It's best maybe not to just be the only person running the whole show, if that makes sense. It's always great to bounce ideas off people and get some additional perspectives and just distribute the work a little bit. And it may be hard to get people to agree to putting in some extra time to be a leader on your team, but people are always looking for leadership or development opportunities. So definitely leverage that and do what you can to provide that for them. So one thing that I would definitely recommend if you do have a leadership team is to create positions for them. And what I mean by that is, you'll have like a president, you probably need a treasurer for your school requirements, maybe a secretary or vice president, whatever you need. But you want to, when you're structuring these positions, you kind of want to think about what do you need this year to like make sure your team functions and fulfills all your requirements, but like what will fulfill your needs in years to come. So you don't want to have to keep changing your positions every year if you don't need to, but something that will be sustainable. And with each position, you do want to also outline the responsibilities very clearly, just so people know what they need to do, what they're responsible for, and just so you make sure that every responsibility your team has is covered. So something that I did at UNC was wrote up just a document with all the positions we wanted to open up, and then just bullets of what each position was expected to do. So this also just helps you think about like what you need, and if you need to make more positions or if you can consolidate positions, I think that's a really helpful exercise. So those are a few tips from my end. I'm going to open it up to Elise, Sterling, and Kenzie. If you all have anything to add, feel free.
So we have kind of a pretty small team. So we have a vice president and president, but since there's only around 7 of us, we usually include like a lot of the team members and decisions that we're making so that it's more inclusive. But I know when you get more people, more opinions, it's kind of hard to do that. But if you have a smaller team, sometimes it's nice to involve everyone so everyone's on the same page and can have input.
Yeah, we have about 5 people on our leadership team, and that's worked out pretty well. I'd say definitely try and work as a team. as a group, like don't try and do it on your own. That makes it really hard. And then one other thing is just to try and get new jumpers involved as well on the leadership team, and it shouldn't be only experienced people.
Yeah, I would also add that starting a leadership team is very specific to each school. So one of the things that I've heard that people in the past, what our members have done in the past is that we've looked at other teams' leadership structures. So one of our founding members, Justin Meyer, was a part of another club called Tyco. That's a performance group, and we took a lot of our leadership structure and other like team bonding and stuff like that we could talk about later from different clubs that our founding members are a part of.
Great, thanks guys. So another point that we want to talk about here, the second bullet, is talking about transition plans. So the first time you start a leadership team, it's probably really great. You have a nice team to work on things, but then the year ends and you've got to transition because people obviously graduate from university, try different things, or have different interests they want to pursue. So you want to early on consider the process you want to follow for selecting new leadership each year. And now the process may not be the same each year. It may not be it may not be typically what you hear about other clubs doing, but you just kind of have to do what works for you. A lot of clubs do elections, and this is especially helpful if you have a lot of people, because then you can just get enough, input to make an election fair. Another question you want to consider is, are all of the leadership spots up for grabs every year, or are just some up for grabs? So I know at UNC, when we transitioned, when I finished up, it was really just like, if people were graduating, those spots were available. But the people who were sticking around, if they wanted to keep their position, they could. So that's just one way to think about it. And also, who is deciding who is going to be in the leadership team the next year? Like I said, you can do elections and have the whole team decide, or you could have the existing leadership team kind of decide as a group, or maybe just the president and whoever's next to the president, the vice president or treasurer, just kind of appoint people based on who they think or what would be best for the team. Another thing to consider when thinking about transitions is the timing of them. So this can make a big difference. You want to make sure your leadership team is finalized before the end of the year so that it's ready for the next year, because there may be some prep work before the year starts, if that makes sense. So over the summer, you may have to get together a little bit and just make sure your paperwork is filled out. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but being proactive is definitely really good in selecting your leadership team. I'm going to open the floor back up to Kenzie, Elise, and Sterling to talk about any other transition plans or advice you may have.
Okay, so for us, we're a sports club, so we're required to do in-person elections. There just has to be 50% of our members present. So that's just something that's already set up by our school. So that might be something to keep in mind. And then another thing is just making sure that you get underclassmen involved on the leadership team so that as you're transitioning and people graduate, you have people to take over and they know what's going on, because that's something that we're going through right now. So just something to keep in mind as you're setting that up.
Yeah, for our team, juniors usually take on the highest level roles, and former leadership, especially the president, will mentor leadership the following year. So we have so we're really intentional in making sure that juniors are mostly make up the leadership team, so that after they finish their position, they can be on the team and stick around to help mentor underclassmen or even sophomores to mentor underclassmen the next year in order to take on the roles. And that has been really successful for us. And instead of having, for example, seniors taking on roles and then leaving the next year, not being able to provide perspective and mentorship to the leaders the next year. And also, one thing I also want to mention is some next steps that we're thinking about is formalizing the process of mentorship. It's kind of been informal so far, but really I'd like detailing that out for the next year and updating the roles that we have written out. Our constitution hasn't been updated since our founding, so it'd be really helpful to kind of update our constitution with not only the roles, but also just helpful tips of what past presidents and past financial officers have found helpful in the past to future roles.
Yeah, I'll definitely echo that. Thanks for bringing that up, Sterling. But advice to your incoming leadership team is super helpful. So any just like a guide document you can create as you're transitioning out just to help people have something to rely on is really great to use. All right, so I'm going to move to our next slide, which is another administrative upkeep slide, but it's about reporting. So your school may require a lot of different reporting requirements for a sports club or a student organization, whatever your team may be, recognized at your university. So these reports may come multiple times throughout the year, so every quarter, every semester, or just once per year. And with these reports, they a lot of times ask for a lot of different information. So they could ask for things like activities you do both on and off campus, so things like shows, workshops, competitions, and then if you interact with other clubs on campus, they may want you to name them. They could ask you what campus resources you use, and they could also even ask for like financial reports for the year. So one thing just to think about is looking at those reporting requirements early on, so you know what you'll need to report at the end of the year or throughout the year, so that you can kind of keep a running proactive list of that information for your team. And another thing is, if you are recognized by like multiple organizations on your university, so like at UNC, we're both a sports club and a student organization, which are separate things, both have different reporting requirements. So just be aware of that. If that's the case for you, you don't want to miss one and do the other and end up, I guess, on probation or something for one of them. And my last tip before I open it up to the other three leaders here is just get to know the staff that you will be working with, the people who are leading the student groups and help you through these reporting processes. So at UNC, our sports club program director met with us on a regular basis and asked us questions, let us know what we needed to do and things like that. And she was a great resource throughout the year in case we had questions or to remind us like if we had things we need to do to remain compliant. So those are my tips, and I'll open it back up to the floor to the three of you.
Yeah, I would say we have a direct report in our club sports. So I'd say really use them as a resource because they know the campus, they know how to work like the campus department that you're with. So they can help you get a lot of the places that you need to instead of you trying to figure out on their own. Because usually they're like a graduate assistant at our college. So like they're there to help you because they're doing that basically as like their internship to graduate. So just really use anyone at the university as a resource to help you.
Thanks, Nancy. All right, so that's it for administrative upkeep. I do want to take a minute or two and open up the floor to anyone else in the session. If y'all have input or questions about the administrative upkeep things, both leadership and reporting, feel free to go ahead and ask.
I also have another thing I can add. One thing I've also found really helpful with working with admin is doing in-person meetings, or I guess Zoom meetings now, if possible. It has also really helped in, instead of just asking for something, they can also offer a lot more support. It could be more like a dynamic conversation than just receiving specific help on certain things. That's helped a lot with us for, yeah, with like financial planning for our club, and not just like asking about like specific questions about a receipt. We'll be able to have like a full-on conversation and be able to talk about all the like concerns, problems that's going on in our club.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Let's keep it moving here. So the next topic, like I mentioned, we want to talk about is funding. So there's a couple ways you can get funding at your university, depending on what avenues you do have available, but there's a couple here that I've listed that may be opportunities for some of y'all. So the first one is member dues. And this one is interesting because it's kind of weird to ask people to pay money, especially for something like jump rope that I feel like a lot of people just have done on their own time. But I would highly recommend collecting dues from your members at the start of the year if you can under university policy. This is a great guaranteed source of funding for your team, and it can just be easily allocated to something that everyone's going to need eventually throughout the year. So things like ropes or the t-shirt that you use or registration for the summit. So highly recommend that. And the way to calculate how much you should actually charge for dues can be dependent on those things that everybody's going to need. So like I said, a shirt, registration for the summit. So you can kind of just ballpark how much those each will cost for each person, and collect dues maybe based on that amount per person. And then later on, when those events come around, you have the funding to cover the registration for each member on your team. So just to give you an idea, if I remember correctly, at UNC last year, we charged our members about $60 per person for the whole year. And we also had a by semester option for $35 in case people were studying abroad or just were in it for a short period of time. So that's just kind of an estimate. If you haven't charged dues yet, that's where we ended up. We did not jump straight to $60 from $0. We, I think, progressively worked up to that a little bit. And we always kind of, asked people what they were comfortable paying because we never wanted to ask too much. So that was my experience with dues. And for my other 3 leaders here, if you guys want to add anything about your experience with dues, feel free.
Yeah, so for Ball State, we usually try and keep the cost as low as possible just to get people to join. So I think it was around $20. And I think it's really important to tell people up front, like what they're paying for, whether it's a shirt or ropes or anything like that. And then we usually had an additional cost for summit stuff or any other competitions that we went to. So we try and get most of it covered through allocation from the university, but if we did have additional costs, people would have to pay extra for that. But our main goal was just to get people to join, so we tried to keep costs low.
Thanks, Elise. All right, so the second source of funding we wanted to discuss is university appropriated funding. So what I mean by this is some universities may have like a budget allocated for student clubs or club sports, and they have to give that money to the certain clubs, but you kind of may have to go through an application process in order to be awarded that money from your university. So at UNC, there was a process every semester where we had to submit an itemized list of everything we wanted to purchase that year. We would submit the form, and then they would ask us to come in and present that budget in like a short 3-minute presentation to the finance committee. And then they would award us an amount based on kind of like what, our demonstrated level of need for each thing, as well as just what they had available. So knowing the timeline for that process was really, really important for us because if you miss deadlines, you don't get funding. So that was something that we kept tabs on a lot throughout the year. Another point to mention is that some funding from your university may come with strings attached. So on a separate note about UNC, we also were able to get funding from the sports club program, but something that they required each sport club to do was fundraise a certain percentage of the money that they were given from the program, if that makes sense. So this is just to make sure that we're not just relying totally on the program funding, and we're also fundraising money for ourselves. So just be aware of that if that's the same experience you have at your university, and you don't want to fall short on those because you may lose funding in the future if you don't meet this requirement. And the last thing I will say before opening up the floor a little bit more is that accessing your funds may not be like accessing a personal bank account. You may not just have a debit card or something. It may be like an on-campus account that you have that you may have to submit requests to pull funds out of or submit paperwork or things like that. So it's really good to get to know that process well. And I'm sure if you ever have to interact with it, you will come to know it very intimately. But personally, that was one of the things that took a lot to like get used to and get really good at was getting the funding paperwork correct. Because at UNC, we did have internal bank accounts. So just an FYI. Elise, Kenzie, Sterling, anything to add here about university appropriated funding?
Yeah, I think this is also very highly specific to this school, but for us, a lot of our funding is, our university sponsored funding is tied to whatever you said it was in the application. So one of the things that we've done in the past few years is make our wording more general so we don't tie ourselves up into committing to a certain type of thing. Like instead of saying, oh, double Dutch rope, saying like just ropes, so you don't have to like specifically get double Dutch ropes. And also, yeah, just being on top of that timeline, planning ahead, and also thinking about of things maybe you want to grow the club and do other things in the future has been helpful in trying to apply for these grants and doing the applications.
Thanks, Sterling. All right, so third funding stream I want to briefly just touch on because it's not super applicable, but these are grants. So what I mean by grants are usually just like independent sources of funding, and usually the deal with grants are they are aimed to fund a specific program or initiative that a group may want to do. And typically these will ask, your program or initiative to serve a particular population, which usually does not include like cost of your team for like jump ropes, travel, uniforms, or things like that. So if you have like a program that you want to start through your team, like an after school program, you may be able to access grants through that. So that's just an idea if you have some of those extra programs that you're interested in. But the last funding stream that I wanted to mention that I think is one that everyone really can do, and it's a lot more nebulous, is fundraising. So this is a really great way to get access to funding without very many strings attached. And you can really do it in any way that you can imagine. So I really just want to kind of name out some successful fundraisers that we've all had in our experience. I'll name a few that we've done at UNC. I think we've mentioned this at past summits, but we have something we do where we get a bunch of our teammates or friends who have dogs. We'll ask them to donate their dogs to us for about an hour or two of time. We'll bring them into a really common area of our campus and kind of like create this little, I guess, dog pen or something. And people can like donate a couple dollars to the Carolina Jump Rope team. And in return, they can hang out with the dogs, maybe jump rope a little bit if they want to. That surprisingly was one of our most successful fundraisers. We also at one point started charging a fee if we do a performance off campus, just for our time and our effort. And usually people, if it's a big event, people are willing to pay you for your time. Some other things we've done are just selling our team shirts to the broader jump rope community, and then doing benefit nights at local restaurants in the college town, and then volunteering at various sporting events. So I want to open it up to Elise, and Kenzie, and Sterling to see if y'all have any other fundraising opportunities or ideas that have worked well for y'all.
I feel like ours are pretty much the same. It's kind of hard to sell things to college students because we're all broke. So the ones where you're like trying to sell stuff, it's like no one can afford it because it's like I already just paid tuition. So really the ones where you can ask the community for help and like giving you money is the best.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so keeping the cost low. If you ask for donations, like for our puppies thing where we ask for donations, we always kept it like to $1 or $2. But people love dogs, and if you get a lot of people, that adds up really quick. So, but that is a really good point, Kenzie. All right, so just looking at the time, we are coming close. So we have one more thing we wanted to talk about, which is team culture. So a couple things about this. Branding is really important to your team. And this really has a lot to do with social media and making your presence known. So definitely make use of social media in any way you possibly can. Post frequently, create a lot of cool content. Jump rope is fun to watch for people who don't see it. So the more you can put it out there, the more attention you'll be able to get. And just a couple other tips that I have is put a lot of effort into designing your shirts so that your members will want to wear them outside of practice and people see that. Make a website if you have the time to, and also use an email address for your team and not maybe just your personal email. Second thing I want to touch on is recruiting. So a lot of schools will probably have involvement fairs going on, and this is a way for people to sign up for clubs that they're interested in at the beginning of the year or midway through the year. Definitely take advantage of these. A couple of things that will help draw people in is making a cool poster that shows pictures and a little bit of information about your club. But also something I've done in the past is we've had like a video assembled of some performances we've done in the past, and we'll just have that playing up on our little table that we have. People come and watch, and then we have a little sign-up sheet where they put their name and email down, and then we send them emails whenever we do stuff. So that's kind of a general rundown of recruiting strategies that I've experienced. But Kenzie, Elise, Sterling, any other recruiting strategies y'all have had success with?
Try to get involved at like freshman nights in the fall. Those are like super helpful, especially at our club sports. They always hold like freshman night specifically for club sports. So there's only like 20 tables that they can come to, and try to get them involved with jumping. Because if you can show them how cool it is on the spot, it's a lot easier to get people to come instead of just saying, oh, watch this cool video of jump rope. And then everyone's like, oh, I could never do that.
Another thing that's actually worked for us this year is because of COVID, we've had to move our practice space around a lot. And so kind of practicing in weird places or like in the middle of the basketball courts. And so other people have been able to see us that haven't seen us before. And that's helped a lot because they'll just be walking by and they'll be like, hey, what's this? And we'll let them join and check it out. So that's been really good.
Yeah, this is more about branding, but I would say also make sure to be responsive to your email. One big problem we've had in the past is that somebody sends an email to us during the summer, nobody's checking the inbox. And so it's really important to be really responsive to the email, have an out of office message during school breaks. Professionalism really goes a long way, and there's a lot of opportunities out there that people just like randomly emailed our email address with. And so, yeah, it really helps having a brand of being professional and being reliable to work with. That helps with like gigs, workshops, and other opportunities you may be reached out to at your club email.
Definitely. All right, y'all. So sorry, we're running a little short on time, but I want to keep us moving a little bit. Actually, one more thing I want to talk about on the last slide. So tryouts is one thing you want to think about a lot in terms of your culture. That's really involved with recruiting. So if you want to have a tryout process, you can, you don't have to. But I think as your team starts to get bigger, it's something to consider. Just gonna flip on to the last slide here. A couple things you want to do for keeping people engaged throughout the year is regular activities. So have a regular practice schedule, but also think about some activities you can do outside of practice to keep things fun for people. Something we've done is like a kickoff session at the beginning of the year to put our shows together. And yeah, last thing I want to mention is just quality and reputation, kind of related to what Chris Sterling was talking about, was being dependable as an organization. So if people contact you, respond quickly, put on good performances, ensure that like people are going to have a good experience with you as a team. That's kind of just a general comment. So yeah, that is about all we had today. We're about at the top of the hour, so I want to let you guys go if you need to prepare for the workshop, especially if you're teaching. Probably a good time to go and log on to that. I will stick around here maybe for a little bit if you have any questions for any of you who are attending. I'd be happy to answer them. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining. I think you can either log off here or join the main room and take a quick break and get ready for the workshop. Thanks, y'all.